January 1st, 2015, from the Florida Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida. It was the Missouri Tigers versus the Minnesota Golden Gophers in the Citrus Bowl. So the Tigers would start with the ball first on their own 25 after the kickoff. They were then faced with a 2nd and 17 from the 18. Maty Mauk dropped back and he was intercepted by Derek Wells. So now the Golden Gophers would take over on their own 43 with about 14 left in the first. They're then faced with a 3rd and 10 from the Mizzou 39 after having picked up a first down a couple plays earlier. And Mitch Leidner was sacked by Marcus Golden. He forced the fumble, and now it was Missouri's ball on their own 44. They ended up getting into Minnesota territory. They were faced with a 1st and 10 on the 42. Maty Mauk dropped back to pass. He was intercepted by Brian Body Calhoun. And so now the Gophers would take back over on their own 20 with 11.5 left in the first. They would end up bringing the ball into Missouri territory, and on 3rd and 3 from the Missouri 20, Rodrick Williams Jr. ran it in 20 yards for the touchdown to put the first points on the scoreboard for the Gophers, with the score now Minnesota 7, Missouri 0. So now the Tigers had the ball on their own 25 after the kickoff. They would go 3 and out on the possession and ended up punting from their own 34. So now the Golden Gophers would take over on their own 13 after the punt with about 4 minutes left in the first quarter. They would end up bringing the ball into Missouri territory with the drive stalled on the 42. So after 6 plays, they ended up punting the ball. And so now Missouri would take over on their own 10-yard line after the punt with about a half a minute left in the first. They were faced with a 2nd and 4 from the 16, and Marcus Murphy ran it for a yard to bring the first quarter to a close. So after 1 quarter of play, the score was Minnesota 7, Missouri 0. So now to open up the second quarter, the Tigers had the ball on their own 17. It was 3rd and 3. Mauk got stopped for no gain. They elected to go for it on 4th down, and Harold Brantley picked up 19 yards in the first down at the Missouri 36. They then gave it to Marcus Murphy. He picked up 19 yards. It was now a 1st down in Minnesota territory at the 45. But their drive would end up stalling at the 39. And so after 8 plays on the possession, they brought out the punting unit. And now Minnesota would take over, backed up against their own end zone on their own 2-yard line with about 12 minutes left before halftime. They went 3 and out on the possession and ended up punting from their own 10. So now Missouri would take over with about 9.5 minutes left in the second quarter. They had it on the Minnesota 48 after the punt. And on 1st down, Russell Hansbrough ran it 21 yards for the first down on the Minnesota 27. Then on 3rd and 4 from the 21, Marcus Murray ended up running it 12 yards for the first down to make it 1st and goal on the 9. They weren't able to get into the end zone, and so out would come Andrew Baggett to attempt a 21-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and that put the first points on the board for the Tigers, with the score now Minnesota 7, Missouri 3. So now the Gophers would take over on their own 25 with about 6.5 left before halftime. And after 6 plays, they would end up punting from their own 37. So now the Tigers would take back over on their own 33 with about 3 minutes left in the second quarter. And on 2nd and 4 from the 39, Marcus Murphy picked up 16 yards in the first down at the Minnesota 45. Maty Mauk then picked up 20 in the first down at the 25. And on 2nd and 10 from the 25, Maty Mauk hit Bud Sasser for a 25-yard touchdown. And now the Tigers were in the lead with the score Missouri 10, Minnesota 7. So now after the kickoff, the Gophers would take over on their own 25 with about a minute left before halftime. They would get a first down, but then an incomplete, actually a complete pass for 5 yards from Leidner to Isaac Frocher would end up bringing the first half to a close. So at halftime in the Citrus Bowl was Missouri 10, Minnesota 7. So now to open up the second half, Missouri would kick off. They went for an onside kick and they recovered. And so they tricked the Gophers, and now they had it in Minnesota territory at the 47. Marcus Murphy then ran 25 yards for the first down to the 22-yard line. He then picked up another 9 yards, but they weren't able to get the first down, and they ended up losing a couple on 3rd. And so now Andrew Baggett would come out to attempt a 33-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and now the Tigers were up by 6 with the score. Missouri 13, Minnesota 7. So now the Gophers would take over on their own 25 with 13 left in the third. They would get a first down, and on 1st and 10 from the 46, Mitch Leidner hit Maxx Williams for a 54-yard touchdown. And it was now Minnesota back in the lead by 1 with the score Minnesota 14, Missouri 13. So now the Tigers would take over after the kickoff on their own 26 with less than 12 minutes left in the third. They went 3 and out on the possession and ended up punting from their own 32. But on the punt, it was fumbled by Marcus Jones, and so now Missouri would take over as Tyler Hunt jumped on the ball, and the Tigers had it 1st and 10 on the Minnesota 34. They ended up getting a first down off a penalty on 2nd down. And then on 2nd and 12 from the 18, Maty Mauk ran it in himself for the 18-yard touchdown. They went for the 2-point conversion, but they failed. And so now it was a 5-point lead for the Tigers with the score Missouri 19, Minnesota 14. So now the Gophers would have the ball on their own 43 after a 57-yard return on the kickoff by Jalen Myrick. And so now on the first down, Mitch Leidner would hit KJ May for a 20-yard reception, a first down at the 23. They weren't able to get into the end zone, and so out would come Ryan Santoso to attempt a 38-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and that brought the Gophers within 2 with the score, Missouri 19, Minnesota 17. So now the Tigers would take over with about 7.5 left in the third. They had it on their own 25 after the kickoff. They would bring the ball to midfield into Minnesota territory on 3rd and 15 from the Minnesota. Well, actually on 2nd and 9 from the 34. Maty Mauk was sacked by Theron Cochran. And then 2 plays later, after a penalty, on 3rd and 15 from the 40, Maty Mauk was sacked, this time by Michael Emafula. And so now out would come the punting unit after 9 plays as the Gophers would end up getting the ball back after the punt on their own 11 with about 1.5 minutes left in the third. And then on 2nd and 10 from the Minnesota 37, Mitch Leidner fumbled the ball, and it was recovered by Braylon Webb. And so now the Tigers would take over on the Minnesota 34 with just seconds left in the third quarter, and an incomplete pass brought the third quarter to a close. So after 3 quarters of play, the score was Missouri 19, Minnesota 17. So now to be in the fourth quarter, the Tigers had it on the Minnesota 34 with 2nd and 10. They wouldn't get a first down, and they would end up faced with a 4th and 3. They elected to go for it, and Braylon Webb was stopped for no gain. And so now they turn the ball over on downs, and the Gophers would take over on their own 27 with 13.5 left on the clock, down by 2. But they went 3 and out and ended up punting from their own 32. So now the Tigers would take over on their own 10-yard line with less than 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They're faced with a 3rd and 2 from the 18, and Russell Hansbrough ran it 3 yards for the first down to the 21. Then on 2nd and 9 from the 22, Russell Hansbrough ran all the way 78 yards for the touchdown. And it was now Missouri 26, Minnesota 17. So now the Gophers would take over on their own 36 with about 9.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. But after 7 plays, they ended up punting from the Missouri 48. So now the Tigers would take over on their own 20 after the punt with less than 7 minutes left to play in this game. And on first down, Marcus Murphy ran it 69 yards all the way to the red zone. So it was a first down on the Minnesota 11. Hansbrough then ran for 2 yards on 2 plays. And now on 3rd and 6 from the Minnesota 7, Maty Mauk hit Bud Sasser for the 7-yard touchdown pass. And it was now a 16-point lead for the Tigers with the score Missouri 33, Minnesota 17. So now the Gophers would get the ball on their own 44 after the kickoff. There was less than 5 minutes left to play, and they would end up bringing the ball into Missouri territory. They got all the way down to the 8-yard line, and 3 incomplete passes would bring up 4th and goal from the 8. They elected to go for it in a 4th incomplete pass. This one kind of a trick play, but it turned the ball over on downs, and now Missouri had on their own 8-yard line, and they took 3 knees, and this game came to a close. So the Tigers win in the Citrus Bowl. So Missouri wins to the final score, Missouri 33, Minnesota 17 in Orlando. And in the Citrus Bowl for the Tigers, Maty Mauk was 12 for 19. He had 97 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He also had 11 carries for 38 yards and a rushing touchdown. So 3 total touchdowns for Maty Mauk. And for Mitch Leidner, he was 21 for 31 with 258 passing yards and a touchdown. And the leading rusher in this game was Marcus Murphy. He had 12 carries for 157 yards. He He also had 2 receptions for 16 yards, and Russell Hansbrough had 15 carries for 114 yards, including a touchdown. And David Cobb of the Gophers was their leading rusher with 21 carries for 81 yards. And the leading receiver in the game was Maxx Williams of the Gophers. He had 7 receptions for 98 yards, including a touchdown. And KJ May had 3 receptions for 75 yards. And the leading receiver for the Tigers was Bud Sasser with 7 receptions for 68 yards. And the Gophers had a couple of picks as Brian Bodie Calhoun and Derek Wells each had picks. But it wouldn't be enough as Missouri was the only team to score in the fourth quarter. Going into the quarter, it was a 2-point game, but the Tigers finished strong as they extend their lead from 2 to 16 with those 2 touchdowns in the fourth. And the 78-yard run by Russell Hansbrough, and then Maty Mauk finishes off that drive with a 7-yard touchdown of Bud Sasser. The final score in the Citrus Bowl, Missouri 33, Minnesota 17.